Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a friend and supporter of the honeybee and the program that we have here. It is very important. It's something that has to be done. It's not a might do, it's a must do, and certainly fantastic that you've attended. A bit of history. Over 150 years ago, the honeybee arrived in New Zealand. It was introduced, bee stock was initially English, but today predominantly Italian. The New Zealand's diverse native floral resources at that time offered limited food sources, and there were a lot of exotic plants brought in and introduced in the late 1800s which offered higher nutritional pollen and nectars. Commercial beekeeping developed during the early 1900s. Beehives grew substantially after the First World and Second World Wars, and by the late 1990s we had what we have today, around 5,000 beekeepers, but they were only running 3,000 commercial colonies. Key nectar crops throughout that period: white clover, pastoral floral, New Zealand natives, kamahi, riwariwa, pahutakawa, and later manuka. Now I can tell you, when I was beekeeping back in the 80s, manuka was worth $1 per frame because I used to buy it for feed. All right. So let's say there's 3 kilos on the frame, about 33 cents. Today it's $33. So it's a big difference in what has happened in that time. The only non-floral crop was beech honeydew, which comes from the North Canterbury and the middle region where Ricky bee keeps. It's a great product. It wasn't accepted in the New Zealand market and has been a traditional export product ever since we started to harvest it. The nitrogen benefits of pollinating white clover seed to pasture was a key management tool and is a key management tool, and I beat that drum on a daily basis throughout the farming community. That conversation is working. It's working because when you start to put restrictions on stock numbers and nitrogen application, the honeybee comes into play in a big way, and it's extremely important. I'll talk about that a bit further. As I said, each seed set has a lifespan of 7 years in the ground for the nitrogen benefits. So it's a lot better and a lot more healthy for your pasture to do it naturally. Bee habitat was assisted historically in the traditional sheep and beef farming practice, which included shelter belts and of course those wonderful things, gorse hedges, really important. Disease management: American foulbrood pest management strategies established approximately 15 years ago to manage American foulbrood disease in New Zealand. The simple basis was seek and destroy by fire. It's a total success story. It is the best disease management program in the world today, and it has the absolutely highest success rate. New Zealand's AFB disease is the lowest in the world, and we have, with that, some of the healthiest bees. It provides the foundation for our export compliance and our export program, and it, of course, as Ricky touched on, we have a no drugs policy, which is a key element. We talk about manuka honey and its antibacterial properties, but we don't want to be adding the antibiotics in because we're treating bees. All right? It's not the way to do it. The game changer, year 2000, the varroa mite. It was discovered in the Auckland port area. Before detection, it had been inadvertently spread by the beekeepers throughout the region. It was totally unexpected. The industry and MAF at the time were unprepared. There were no management tools available. Containment lines were drawn up, but they proved to be ineffective because wherever you found the mite, it had already moved another 100 kilometres down the road and it was already underway. Miticide treatments are really the only effective management tool, though we have some new treatments coming into play now. Year 2006, varroa mite was found in Nelson. We believe it arrived in a swarm which was suspected to have hitchhiked across the strait on a logboat. It quickly became established. Here's some photos of the varroa mite, and it gives you a fair idea. On this bee here, you can see there's multiple mites on there, and there have been cases where the male drone bee has been seen to carry up to 9 or 10 mites per bee. That's how the mite hitchhikes its way around. It's extremely clever. It will head out of a hive on a bee. The bee will land on a clover head. The mite will jump off and sit on their head and wait for the next bee to arrive. And as soon as it senses movement, it jumps back on and away it goes again. And that's how it piggybacks its way around. It's a dinner plate size problem. So if you stand up and put a dinner plate on your stomach, then you'll understand what the bee's carrying around. And not only is it a dinner plate size problem, but the dinner plate's sucking on your body fluids at the same time. So not a great thing to have going on, and you can appreciate that the bees don't like it. All right. We had a pest management strategy for the South Island operating at the time, but and effectively it failed. When we got down to the crunch, the government said no, they wouldn't support us. And even though we've done a lot of work, I can tell you that we bought every hive out of Nelson and we re-exported to the North Island. They had varroa, we thought we'd give it back. But even then, we weren't. It had already jumped into the feral bee stock, and it was basically we were unable to stop it. I think the other critical thing is that we're starting to see at this point a changing footprint of New Zealand farming, and we're particularly seeing that in the South Island with massive change, dairying and large arable, and with that comes post and wire, no gorse hedges, no shelter belts, and basically a hostile environment for the honeybee. But they do not handle areas where the nor'west blowing at 200 kilometres an hour and they've got nowhere to go and nowhere to find wind protection or flight pathways. Honeybee pollinates 80% of all agriculture and horticultural floral plants, but there are other pollinators, as Linda's touched on many times: moths, flies, native bees, bats, birds, bumblebees and other vertebrates. The floral resource determines what pollinator is most effective and at what time of the day they will be there to actually pollinate. And it's been proven, I might have touched on it before, that in a glasshouse environment with 3 different vegetable crops, the bee will be seen to work a certain crop at a certain time of the day, and at a certain point it will change across and move to the next one. The plant world's very clever. It actually determines that it wants to be pollinated, therefore it's clever and it shares its pollinator around. It doesn't hog the limelight, if you like. So really important. Most native floral plants pre-arrival of the honeybee, as we know, are pollinated by the small native bees and birds. Birds were a big pollinator in New Zealand, and all the plants were basically, the florals were created for that type of for pollination. Today we watch the bumblebee actually chew the backside out of a plant so it can get into the pollen resource, because it can't get in through the top because it's too big. So insects are clever, they work a way around things, how they actually get things done. There's the pollinator in action, and you can see the pollen being stored and carried back to the hive on that bee. Now some bees are out there specifically to collect pollen, others are collecting other things like water and nectar and other things. The pollen resource is critical, and Linda's touched on it, and Ricky and Barry have touched on it. It's really, really important. In horticulture today, the honeybee is the principal pollinator, and the crops include kiwi fruit, pip fruit, stones, berries, values, far in excess of $1 billion a year. In agriculture, specifically the commercial small seed sector, carrots, beets, brassicas and clovers. Others are squash, pumpkins and other vegetables. We are the largest exporter of carrot seed in the world now. Nearly 80% of all carrot seed exported for planting comes from New Zealand. Used to be produced in the Northern Hemisphere. They got a pollen mite that became resistant to chemicals, and within 2 years it wiped out that ability. And it gave New Zealand an opportunity. But we don't want to stuff it up, so we need to be extremely careful. All right? Great value. Greatest value, grassland farming. And the boys have touched on that, but far in excess of $1 billion a year available to grassland farming system, regeneration of nitrogen and the benefit of that pasture. Now I talk at farming meetings all the time and educate farmers when they plant the seed, shut the paddock up and let the seed be pollinated and fall to the ground. But what normally happens is that when those little white heads pop up, they let those little lambs in straight away and they chew them off. But they don't realise that they're actually chewing away 7 years of benefit. And we're starting to see that change. And I spoke just recently in a Waitrose meeting in the South Island, New Zealand, to a large group of farmers, and I spoke about the importance of the honeybee and shutting off your pasture. And our North Canterbury beekeepers, within 3 days, one of our key beekeepers had received 5 phone calls from farmers in that area looking towards next year so that they could do that. So the message works, you've just got to get it out there and educate people. So I've got here the honeybee is the primary tool on farm orchard. There are no other options available that can undertake the work and deliver the results on a commercial basis. High country clover, in action, and there's the honeybee flat out there. Biosecurity and the honeybee. We're a country that's totally dependent on our food exports. We're our food exporter. That's our value. And on that basis, biosecurity and the protection of our whole farming and horticulture system is actually critical for our survival. One mistake can jeopardise an industry, and you can just look at what happened in the kiwifruit area. You know in this region through here what happened. PSA was a result of poor import health standard management and a lack of understanding that pollen can carry bacteria and disease. Now, I had one of our largest beekeepers, Neil Mossop, he's one of the largest pollinating beekeepers in the country, attend a meeting just the other day on this particular subject. He's part of an ARA committee. He's the only non-scientist on there to looking at the importation of pollen. And when he stood up and said, "Do you understand that pollen can carry bacteria, viruses and diseases?" they said, "No, we didn't know." Now, you just simply have to scratch your head and ask the question. I mean, calling something artificial, which is what they were doing. They were bringing artificial pollen into New Zealand to assist the pollination of kiwifruit, but it wasn't artificial. It was pollen collected from flowers with vacuum cleaners or machines and basically dried and then brought it to New Zealand and sprayed in our orchards. Now, the result of that was PSA. And you can't run and hide from it, even though David Carter and I had some big stoushes politically about the matter. At the end of the day, that's the outcome. You can't hide from it. It was a mistake, and as I've got here, they imported the product under an old import health standard, Nutrimans import health standard, which was out of date and not up with the facts. And I guess the greatest sin is that if you do something and you jeopardise another industry or industries, it is unforgivable. And I make the point that when PSA was discovered at the same time, Nosema ceranae, a bee disease, was also found in the same area, and we did not have that prior to that. Now, we'll never know if it was transmitted via that pollen or not, but you could make some assumption that that's a chance, and it's a chance that we can't afford to have, and we have to be absolutely important. Ricky touched on honey imports, and it's simply courting disaster. Why would you want to bring, firstly, why would you want to bring a product into New Zealand that we already have here anyhow and we don't need any more? We're exporting it. But why would you bring something in that has the potential to bring diseases into our country? Why would you want to do that? And I make the point, does our need for trade compromise the protection of our industries from biosecurity risk? And we have to get that balance right. We can't accept that when Prime Ministry says to us, but the risk is manageable. Well, what is that? Because it just doesn't work for me. If there is a risk, you don't do it. If it's your business and there's a risk, you won't take it unless the return is massive and you're prepared to do it. So it's just common sense. I've got here, does our use of imported feed products place industry at risk? Now, the one critical one that's received a lot of media is the importation of palm kernel expeller from Asia for feeding into our dairy industry. Now, you've got to, again, ask the question. This product's coming from areas that have foot and mouth, which is endemic in the country. And yet we're bringing product from that country into New Zealand and feeding it to our livestock. Again, is it a good thing to be doing? And why do we do these things? Because the impact is massive. What would it do to our economy if foot and mouth arrived in New Zealand? I mean, honestly, we might as well all pack up and go to Fiji, because that's what it would be like. It would decimate our agricultural sector, and it would take a long way to recover from it. So what's coming? And what's coming in biosecurity is government industry agreements and the management of biosecurity on a joint basis between industry and government. Historically, all of biosecurity was managed by government. We were only told when something had come through the gate and was in the country. We had no say on any element pre the gate. GIA is about having a say right through the whole process of biosecurity and helping to establish the rules before a product can be brought into the country. It's going to cost industry to be part of it, but as I've said to Ricky many times, you're better to be at the table and have a say than not be at the table and told later what's going to happen and here's your bill. Right? So it's really important that we get our heads around where this is going and that we get buy-in from the various sectors. Threats to bee health. Lots of discussion about colony hive collapse disorder throughout the world. Is it a risk in New Zealand? What are the triggers? What is the key element? Well, in my opinion, Varroa is the key element. If somebody's sticking a pin in your stomach every week, sooner or later it's going to get infected. And that's what Varroa does. If you have viruses, natural viruses and bacteria in your hive which the bee can live with when he's healthy, what happens when he's not as healthy, those things can enter in through those wounds and into the bee, and your bee health is jeopardised. So if you add some of these other elements, Nosema serrana, anything that's underlined, we've already got it. What's not underlined is what we don't want. Israeli paralysis virus, we don't have it, but Australia does. European foulbrood, we don't have it, Australia does. Right? Small hive beetle, it's the Canadian geese of the beekeeping industry. Excuse the French, but a Canadian geese on pasture just crap all over it and destroys the pasture. The small hive beetle does the same thing, but he does it in the hive. And it's the same principle. That's an absolute disaster. Small hive beetle arrived in Australia from South Africa during the Olympic Games in some pallet loads of television equipment. It wasn't allowed to land at the major airports, so they landed at an Air Force base in Australia. And those pellets had been scraped along the ground before they had been put on the plane, and they picked up the small hive beetle and brought it into Australia. That's simple. All right? We don't want it in New Zealand. So what are the other challenges that can perhaps trigger colony hive collapse disorder? Was obviously when you've got a weakened bee community, a weakened bee, then sprays, chemicals and other challenges come along and they can really push you around. And I've got here, and as Ricky's pointed out, add the irresponsible use of irrigation. And we have some major battles in mid-Canterbury about irrigation use, and we have some major discussions with the farming community from time to time because they're quite happy to have your bees pollinate their carrot crops at the same time as they want to put water all over them. All right? It just doesn't work, and the honeybee doesn't handle it. He doesn't come back to the hive. How would we manage if bee losses reach 35% per annum? What impact on agriculture and horticulture? What is the impact of total bee loss? And the guys have already touched on it. I've got doing nothing is not an option. Pollen is the vitamins and minerals. Nectar is the energy and the sustenance of the bee colony. If you lose one element, the hive is nutritionally weakened and will not survive. Now here's a good example. You need to look closely. This is a supermarket based on honeybees doing their job. This is a supermarket when the honeybee's not there. All right, we'll go back. There we are. Looks pretty good. That's countdown or whatever, pack and save. That's nothing than safe. All right, there's nothing there. All right, really, really important. You need to understand it. That's the value of the honeybee, just to our basic food challenges. Right, immediate challenges, changing footprints. And I've got here, are we following a pathway already trodden? All around the world, America, they've got huge areas of monocultural farming. It doesn't work. And we're starting to do the same thing. We're mad. All right? It's a predictable outcome. Doesn't work. Changing climates determine performance and farm management, and we forget that, so we keep taking down all those shelter belts that our forebears put up to stop the wind blowing the topsoil away. We rip them out again. Misconception drives bad practice. Mother Nature puts things in place for a reason, and people forget. Understand our assets and maximise our outcomes, and working together to add real value and drive positive and sustainable results. What are the drivers in your business? Do you consider the impact on other critical industries? And if you take it away, you must put something back to maintain the balance. Will we allow nature to be our asset, or will artificial be our downfall? And working together, and Ricky's already touched on this, good nutrition, healthy bees, good pollination, great farm outcomes. Educational focus, a focus on pollen, protein, beneficial plants and shrubs to replace those historical foraging plants that are now we're being asked to remove from the land. We need to develop those planting programs and look to get the best result we can. If you remove it, plant an alternative. Honeybees' key high protein spring pollen resources have been flight pathways, etc., etc. I've touched on it already. These guys have touched on the ponds, the perimeters, multifunctional plants. But think about also that if it's a farmer, he might like to have a plant that can be grazed when he's in a drought situation. Seek to add value to the environment, the sustainability of farm outputs, and international market perception. Only as a team can we deliver profitable results for both the honeybee and the land that they support through their pollination activities. There we go. Thank you very much.